Hello, I'm Arik Korman, Communications Director at League of Education Voters, and the parent of a soon-to-be sixth grade son in the public school system who needs special education services. In case you're not familiar with us, League of Education Voters is a statewide nonprofit working with families, educators, and leaders to build a brighter future for every Washington student. Our website is educationvoters.org. We believe that education is a tool for justice. One of the systems that perpetrate racial injustice experienced by communities of color is our schools. We believe that every child deserves an excellent public education that provides an equal opportunity for success. In order to achieve this, we must pursue radical change in our school systems for equity, justice, and liberation. We must build schools and systems that honor the humanity in every student. Welcome to our free online webinar series, Lunchtime LEVinars. We started this series 7 years ago to share information and build knowledge on important and timely issues. Today's LEVinar is about why students need to go outdoors. Overwhelming research shows health and emotional benefits to recess, exercise, and free outdoor play. Our guests today are Dr. Pooja Tandon of Seattle Children's and the University of Washington, Bookie Gates, servant leader in Baseball Beyond Borders and the Gates Ventures Group, Seattle Public Schools parent Linnea Westerlind, author of Discovering Seattle Parks, a locals guide, and KUOW reporter Ann Dornfeld, who covers education. They will discuss the mental health benefits of recess and PE programs in schools, outline what we need now to support school districts in Washington State to incorporate exercise programs into curriculum during this period of distance or hybrid learning, and they'll answer your questions. A couple of housekeeping items before we begin. You'll notice a Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. This is the space for you to submit questions to us. And as always, feel free to send any feedback about the webinar quality to us on the chat function or at info@educationvoters.org. And I also encourage you to use the chat function to talk to each other. Dr. Pooja Tandon is a pediatrician and scientist at Seattle Children's and the University of Washington, and she's also a mother. Her clinical practice as a general pediatrician inspired her to study and promote behaviors, programs, and policies that increase physical activity in children, particularly those from disadvantaged communities. Through experiences in an urban academic clinic, a bilingual community health center, and a large private practice, she repeatedly observed that children's health issues were closely linked to complex factors outside the walls of the exam room. Bookie Gates is a Seattle native, proudly raised in the Central District by his mother, Gert Hauser. He's an alumni of Garfield High School and Washington State University, and has worked with youth and adults in every facet for the city of Seattle for more than 15 years. Bookie is the founder and president of Baseball Beyond Borders, a club he built over the last decade, which seeks to expose urban kids of color to America's national pastime, developing their skills through mentorship, tournaments, camps, and clinics by supporting baseball programs at their local high schools. Baseball Beyond Borders, which has expanded to include Athletes Beyond Borders, as Bookie and his supporters have started a volleyball program for girls as well, also develops and nurtures coaching and leadership skills within the community, giving its student athletes role models while helping prepare them for college and beyond. Ann Dornfeld reports on education for KUOW-FM. Before that, Ann was a roving freelance public radio reporter focusing on environmental issues for KUOW and national shows including Morning Edition, All Things Considered, The Environment Report, and Marketplace. She got her start spinning hip-hop records at the radio station of Oregon State University, where she majored in biology and environmental sciences. She has won awards for her reporting from the Society of Professional Journalists, the Associated Press, and Public Radio News Directors Incorporated, and has also received both investigative and data reporting awards from the Education Writers Association for her coverage of ongoing recess cutbacks and physical education shortages in Seattle area schools. Linnea Westerlind is a PTA member and parent of 3 children in Seattle Public Schools. She is also the co-founder of the parent network Outdoor Childhood Puget Sound, a member of the King County Play Equity Coalition, and the author of a guidebook to Seattle parks. She volunteers in many capacities as an advocate for parks, play, and the outdoors. Welcome, Pooja, Bookie, Ann, and Linnea. Really appreciate you taking the time to join us.
Thank you for having us.
You're very welcome. I would like to start with the first of two questions that we'll be expanding upon. The first one being, what are the mental health benefits of recess and PE programs in schools? And the next question would be, what do we need now to support school districts across Washington state to incorporate exercise programs into curriculum during this period of distance or hybrid learning? And I'll start with the first question, the benefits of recess and outdoor play. I'd like to start with you, Pooja. What would you say that students can gain from recess and activity?
Yeah, thank you for having us on today, Arik. I mean, you know, regardless or even before COVID, the benefits of physical activity, outdoor time, active play for children are numerous, and from kind of physical health benefits to cognitive benefits, and then mental health, which is the specific focus of this question. You know, when children have the opportunity to move their bodies, whether it's kind of physiologic from the blood flow to their brain, that and the opportunities to interact with other children, there are both social emotional benefits to things like depression, anxiety, attention. So they're sort of too numerous to list, but I can summarize it by saying that active play, outdoor play are really a fundamental need and right of every child. And school is one of those places where we can offer that opportunity equitably to every child. So, and I do want to mention, I mean, since we are in the middle of a pandemic, that the physical health benefits also cannot be undervalued. You know, when children are moving their bodies, they're physically active. There is research that supports that their, you know, fitness, their immune system, I mean, all of those things benefit. In addition, being overweight or obesity is a significant comorbidity, meaning people who are overweight adults and in children, we're seeing some evidence tend to be more sick when they are infected by the virus. So many reasons why children need to continue to have access to opportunities to move their body and to be outdoors.
Mm-hmm. And Bookie, what have you seen since you actively work with kids on many levels?
Yeah, you know, I mean, the conversation now is around schools, but I think they're just one piece of the social ecological framework that really is to address the active play or just the recreation, right? Which is just the root word for recreating the mind. And I think it's important because that does have impacts on the mental health aspects. What we're seeing is that we're seeing more openness, we're seeing more engagement, because, you know, being cooped up in a home can be very challenging, right? Not only am I seeing this in our students, I'm also seeing this in our adults, right, that are coming out there. Parents are thriving to get out and to be amongst others, right? It's just a natural part of us being human is our interaction with one another. And so that suppression doesn't really help with the mental stability for individuals to want to thrive and to be in positions to engage. But I think, you know, going back to schools, there's a responsibility, not only just in schools, but a responsibility in total that we create spaces that allows the landscape for access to physical activity to be equitable. And I think at this point, we find that it's inequitable because all we know or all we are associated with is more of the competitive organized sports arena, right? And that's where we tend to identify our recreational aspects to come from. But no, there's other aspects, other means. We just have to be creative and open up our minds and think about how we can be beneficial to the greater community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's important that you point out the equity issues there. And Anne, I know for a long time you did cover racial inequities for KUOW on top of the education reporting that you've done. What have you seen in this regard?
Yeah, I think that, you know, issues of race and racial inequity are inextricable from education reporting. So what I have found in my reporting over the years is that schools that have the highest populations of students of color and lower income students tend to offer the least recess and in many cases offer less PE than whiter and wealthier schools. You know, some schools in Seattle were offering 15 minutes or 0 minutes of scheduled recess a day, letting teachers choose if they wanted to take kids to recess or not, while wealthier, whiter schools were giving kids up to an hour of recess a day. Unfortunately, what I learned is that kids in the whiter, wealthier schools were also most likely to have access to safe play spaces, that have, you know, yards, that have after school soccer, that have all these things that were available to them, and that kids from lower income schools were less likely to have safe play spaces. They might have parks that had some kind of dangerous element, or the caregivers weren't available to take them outside, or they didn't have after school outside activities scheduled. So of course, right now when we have these things only magnified, I think that it's really important for schools to consider how they can weave outdoor activities and exercise into the mainstream academic curriculum in order to kind of really incentivize families to take kids outside, or to encourage kids to go outside if they're old enough to do so by themselves. And where that is not possible, to really maximize the opportunity for indoor play and getting outdoors as much as they can while being inside their house, like opening a window, looking outside, because some of the cognitive benefits that I've seen and also can be linked to the mental health benefits are the undirected attention that kids can enjoy when they're outside at recess. That was something really kind of fascinating that I was learning as I was reporting, was that when kids go outside, it's not just about them running around, having a game, socializing with their friends. It's also that they finally, after hours of really directed attention and being told to pay attention to the teacher, to the the whiteboard, to the lesson, that they can now just go outside and be distracted by a bird flying overhead and wonder, what kind of bird that is or where it's going, or to, notice that there's these pine needles dropping and to try to make something out of that, and just kind of letting their attention kind of expand and be undirected. And the cognitive benefits of that gives them that brain break and allows them to regroup and do the work that might be less compelling if it's online, or if they have a less skilled teacher guiding them in their home. And so I think that it'll be really beneficial to both caregivers and educators and students if those same lessons or opportunities that kids get from recess and PE get woven into the math curriculum, the writing curriculum, the science curriculum that they are doing, and that may that caregivers may be more compelled to make sure kids complete. And so not just treating it as a break or a PE class, but just really weaving it into the fabric of the academics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that sounds great. Linnea, you've done a lot of work with parents and certainly your own kids. What do you see as the benefits for outdoor play and recess and PE?
Yeah, well, as a parent of 3 kids in Seattle public schools, I'm just really concerned about how kids are going to recover from this pandemic. As Pooja stated, the research is really clear on the mental benefits and also the physical benefits of outdoor time and play and recess and movement. And that's why I think that schools should be prioritizing those things when we go back to school. There's so much up in the air about what school's going to look like in the fall, if it's going to be all distance, if there's going to be a hybrid model, if there's maybe going to be some kind of creative solution like outdoor schools. But what we do know is that kids have experienced trauma during this experience. Especially kids of color, but kids have been isolated. They've been absorbing the stress of the adults in their lives. Some of them maybe are even grieving loved ones that they've lost. So we just can't expect kids in the fall to be in front of a laptop for hours and have good, healthy, and happy and successful academic outcomes. We're going to need to look at things differently. If we're going to have kids recover, we may need to take a step back and look at the education system differently and reprioritize what's important. It may be that academics is not the most important thing for the first month of school. It may be really supporting parents at home and getting their kids active, or it may be creative partnerships at parks and community-based organizations if schools are closed. Or it may be, if we can get to schools, it may be a lot more recess and a lot more time for kids to play with their friends and unpack their emotions and redevelop those connections to their teachers. So I think this is such an important topic and something that we can't get wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And in terms of actually making this happen, what you're describing, Linnea, what are some of the levers to do that? What should we do to advocate? Would this be something that could be done at a local level? Would it be to our school boards? Should anything be done at the state level, for example?
I think a lot can be done at the local level to start. I think this is the time for parents especially to be talking to their school board members, to be talking to their superintendents, even their principals, and just be sharing what they need for their kids in terms of recovery, making sure that this is an issue that is brought up. What's disappointing to me is that I have not heard very much of a local or statewide or even a national conversation around the importance of play and the importance of outdoor time and recess in kids' mental and physical health. And there really shouldn't be anything more important than kids' mental and physical health right now. So I think being advocates and speaking up and working together with schools to help shape things. PTAs can be really powerful. And, you know, parent participation in all of this is key. So for schools to be successful, they need parents to be partners in it, and we need to partner with our teachers. So I think it's a great time for us to sort of just reevaluate how we're doing schools and just, you know, build a stronger network of collaboration to try to solve this and try to have some healthy and happy outcomes for kids.
Yeah, thanks. Pooja, Bookie, Anne, where do you see opportunities to work on this issue?
I think there's a few specific things that I had in mind. I mean, one was just prioritizing physical activity. And within that, it's important to sort of think about a couple of things that have been mentioned. I mean, there's PE, there's physical education, the kind of, you know, the actual instruction of those fundamental, what we think of as like physical literacy building blocks of being able to move with confidence and with joy, that often there's research, set kids up for success, whether it's through sports or just recreational activities. So kids do need some physical education piece of this where and that tends to be also more inclusive in that, you know, everybody's involved, everyone's sort of learning how to move their bodies in certain way in age appropriate ways. So I think there's a piece for that. A lot of physical educators, PE teachers also focus a lot on health education, which is critical. And then there's the overall goal of getting kids at least 60 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity every day. And that can be, when you think about, there's this sort of comprehensive school physical activity model of, you know, before, during, and after school, whether it's walking to school, whether it's after school, community-based activities, and things throughout the day, including recess. So as we think about hybrid models or distance learning, you know, where are those places to preserve those elements? I know in some districts, you know, the gyms are going to be repurposed, and teachers that typically teach those, you know, those subjects, PE, are going to be repurposed. So I think prioritizing physical activity throughout the day. I think optimizing the use of outdoor spaces is a specific strategy. Underutilized spaces in every community, some in better condition than others, but how do we use those schoolyards? How do we make them accessible to the community when school's not in session as a park? And then finally, the community connections. And Bookie may be able to speak to this even more, but gosh, there are so many community organizations, resources, clubs, parks departments that could step in and support our school staff and teachers in getting kids moving again. How do we build those connections and optimize those resources in all communities?
Yeah, Pooja, I think I agree. And I think what I'm hoping the school district will embrace, or school districts will embrace, is that they don't have to do this alone, right? I think they will now more than ever be required to be interdependent with community-based organizations to help bring the right solutions to address the physical activity disengagement, I guess we can call it that, within their own communities. I think we also have to recognize too that the culture has to shift within academia related to how we incorporate physical activity, right? We look at the 5 power traits, and one specifically, the disposition of a student, right? There's performing and producing, right? All school districts are building our children around producing dispositions. Well, not every student has a producing disposition. So how do we then look at the natural, what we call the inborn, not developed way of being, which is the natural need to play? And we have movement, right? And I think those things we have to begin to shift and open up the doors to allow for these families to really understand the disposition to then engage and fully increase on the physical activity requirement.
That makes sense.
In addition to that, I think that looking at the cultural barriers to outdoor education, to physical activity in general, I think are really important to consider, because you have a lot of families I encountered in looking at how recess policies are structured at different schools. But some schools say that they're honoring what parents are telling them, which is that they don't want kids outdoors in the rain. They don't want kids getting muddy. Girls not necessarily being as encouraged to play outside as boys are. The girls staying closer to home in some families is the cultural norm. And thinking about how you can, perhaps get past those, or perhaps, maximize activity opportunities given those considerations. So, making gyms available could be, or, making the more less messy kind of playground environments available. Right now, we have had restaurants and bars open in King County, but you haven't had playgrounds open. And, there are some really considerable questions about equity there, because not every kid, has parents who can take them to, King County parks, which have been open, or have, a swing set in their backyard, as, better off families can have. So I think that even right now, we've been seeing some real inequities in the access to safe play spaces for lower income kids and kids of color. And I think that really needs to be addressed, both on the school level, because schools can have the ability to open their play spaces, but also the parks departments making sure that they're really encouraging safe play, even when when the science is showing that surfaces are not a great way to transmit COVID. And we still have, this kind of imbalance of things open that are known to be, good places to spread it, and places closed that are not good places to spread it. So I think that really looking at the policy and how the policy is supporting outdoor play, and making sure that we're not lagging behind the science, both to protect families, but also to make these play spaces available, I think is really important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you so much, Anne. And now I'd like to open it up for questions. So if you have a question for our panel, feel free to type it in the Q&A portion down at the bottom of the screen. No question is too basic. And we have one to start, which kind of piggybacks on what you just said, Anne, which is, why was there such an avoidance of playground spaces with COVID? And I'm sure, Pooja, you might be able to address that, as well as Bookie or Linnea.
I think initially, with the new virus, there were just so many unknowns. I think what we were recognizing, that the concern from surfaces, or the concern of transmission of COVID from surfaces, is probably less than we originally thought. And so I think that was the original concern, that there is some transmission that can happen, if droplets land on a surface and another person touches them and then touches their nose and mouth. So it's a real concern, but I think probably less than some of the others. And especially if people are masking, which is a whole other conversation, but with masking and proper hand washing and other social distancing measures, there are likely ways to open up some of these places safely. We're figuring that out, like Anne said, for restaurants and bars and offices, and there are probably ways for us to think of how to make play spaces safely accessible to children as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have a follow-up question, which is, do you have any data for the safety of surfaces so we can advocate for the use of climbing equipment and swings?
Not yet. I think there's some lab data around kind of UV light. And so there was a thought that, if equipment's out in the sun, does that kind of disinfect it? I have not seen any really solid, convincing evidence to that. What we do have solid evidence around is masking and social distancing and hand washing, I think, or at least emerging evidence that those things are making a difference in transmission.
Yeah, thanks so much. So here's a question, which is, can you help educators, superintendents, and other administrators understand and determine the difference between free play or physical activity and physical education?
Well, I think they're both really important, but they are different things. I think Pooja said it well, that, the goal is to add up to 60 minutes of physical activity a day. A report last year by the King County Play Equity Coalition found that only 19% of kids in King County are meeting that 60 minutes. And that was before the pandemic. So that's probably even less now. That's a really depressing number, that few of kids are getting 60 minutes of activity a day. But it is important to have both of those things. So we need our PE teachers. Absolutely. They are super important. They are experts in how to get kids moving safely. developmentally appropriately ways. But we also need to recognize that kids absolutely need free play. They need that social time. They need to have self-directed play that's not directed by adults. So there needs to be that as combination of activities that all add up to benefiting them physically and emotionally.
Yeah, so here's a more general question, which is, what does outdoor play, or what could outdoor play look like for kids at school and in the community if we're still following all of our guidelines for distance and masking? And I know, Bookie, you could probably talk about that.
Yeah, it takes a lot of scaling up, right? One, you have to increase some of your capacity within your organization or within the school to ensure that you can adhere to those social distancing requirements. I think it also requires creativity, right? I think, and what you don't realize is that we don't have to figure that out, right? That's something that our own kids and our own students can create, right? You have to give them the tools, you have to equip them and empower them to begin to say that, yes, we are in a pandemic, but yet here's ways in which you can still create the space for outdoor recreation, and give them the tools and give them the voice to establish that. And I think that's something that we've found success in doing it. And I believe others can also just kind of follow a similar model that puts ownership back into those individual kids so that they can experience the 60 minutes that they require.
Yeah, I think that's really smart. And I think that one of the real benefits of free play and unstructured recess time for kids is that kids learning how to work out issues, how to be creative, how to create their own rules to games, how to figure out, well, was that person in, is that person out? I think that that harnessing both those social emotional lessons and, the challenge of, well, we're trying to stay 6 feet apart. What are some games that we could work out? I mean, I bet kids would figure that out in about 5 minutes flat.
I was just going to add really quickly that I would love for us to really just look creatively at how we can have kids play. The schools are really focused on getting a laptop to every kid and internet access, which is really important. But what if, we also made sure that every kid had a jump rope or a soccer ball? What if we opened up every school ground as open play spaces right now? Many of them are closed. What if we allowed community-based organizations to run free before and after school programs on school grounds, even if schools are closed? So there's so many different things we could do, shutting down more streets for play, partnering with organizations like the Y that already are experts on play. I just think there's a lot we can do if we're willing to sort of look at things differently.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that outdoor gear, rain boots, cold weather clothes it's so important. My mom was a teacher in Seattle Public Schools for her entire career, and she was, had to keep a closet full of, fleece jackets to give kids because they were too cool to come to school, wearing a coat, or it wasn't the right brand, or their parents couldn't afford it, a raincoat. So I think that also there are a lot for the families who don't want kids coming in muddy because they can't afford to, replace the clothes that the kids are getting stained. I would love to see districts outfit kids with rain gear. I mean, it really doesn't have to cost that much money when you consider all the other things we're spending money on in the schools. For like $30, they can get like a head to toe rain outfit. And making sure you have culturally appropriate options for girls who are not wearing pants. But I think that that would go a long way in getting kids the equipment they need, because, like the saying, no bad weather, just bad gear. For a lot of families, that gear is not part of their wardrobe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for that.
And to Linnea's point, I think we're going to spend a lot of time trying to figure out how we're going to provide the proper and necessary nutrition if we are to kind of shut schools down, or if we don't have access and we're looking at distant learning. Well, let's take that same fervency, right, and making sure that we're addressing some of the physical activity needs that's required, in addition to us being able to provide nutritional standards and support.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for that. And here's a question that I've been hearing a lot, which is, in this time of remote or perhaps soon to be hybrid learning, it's really hard for me to get my child off of a device, whether it's playing video games or actually doing schoolwork. How can I encourage my child to go outside and have physical activity if they're reluctant to do so?
I think you have to model it. Yeah. Go ahead, Pooja.
I was going to say that modeling and then co-doing it. I think, we could all benefit from more physical activity and outdoor time. And I see a question here about isn't there risk of students congregating? And I mean, that's a complicated question, but to the extent that we do need to continue distancing, or if it's all, distance remote learning, here's an opportunity when possible for families to go out together and play together and move together, which could benefit all of us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Linnea, did you have something that you wanted to add?
Yeah, I mean, it is a huge challenge. I mean, I've got 3 kids under 12, and my husband and I are huge outdoor people, and we struggle every day to get our kids outside and off screens and off, and video games are important to them because they connect socially that way. So I think we just have to do our best and recognize that working parents are really struggling. A lot of families have a lot more screen time right now, and we have to forgive ourselves for that. And then just find those little bits of time when you can get out together. Our family started a sort of a mandatory morning walk every day when school shut down. And I mean, the kids complained every day about it, but we had a great family walk for 20 minutes or 30 minutes every morning. And those kind of things add up, and they end up being sort of memorable. So I think we can find ways to have really meaningful outdoor time with our kids. And you don't have to have a backyard. You can take a walk around the neighborhood. You can step outside and look at the stars in the evening together. So just finding those little moments together.
Mm-hmm. I've even heard a tip of walking to your bus stop. Like, even if your children are not boarding a bus, but twice a day, kind of taking that walk just to build it in, or people who are doing their morning commute just to kind of build that walk in. Not the driving commute, just the walking commute.
And we have to shift the narrative too. I think much of our response is around youth physical activity and not conducive of the family, right? And I think if a kid has to be, the behavior has to be modeled in some way, shape, or form. And if we're not supporting our families, mothers, fathers, kinship caregivers, anyone of that nature to also engage in physical activity, then what's our expectation for that child? So I think we have to begin to now look at a holistic family dynamic versus just solely on the individual.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And how do you encourage your child to get outside?
Let's see. I mean, I think that what's kind of funny is there's what has encouraged him is kind of a hybrid where he gets to take the screen outside. So he has a little camera and he likes to take pictures of things. So he'll go outside and do that. But I mean, right now, luckily it's warm enough that we turn, the sprinkler on and he'll go out there and get it freezing for a long time. But it's so hard for us too, because, I'm working full time. My husband's working full time. And so, the screen is we're relying on it way too much, both to teach our sons and also to entertain them and keep them out of our hair while we're trying to work on our screens. So, getting out for a family walk, just trying to make that part of the routine. But not all families have a yard or have that time in the day to take that family walk. So I think that just trying to find what's attracting them to video games it's a game, right? So to the extent that you can gamify something out in the yard, I think or in the neighborhood, I think that is a good strategy for a lot of kids. Or just kind of figuring out what interests them and what is outside that could work alongside their interests and incorporating that into their day. But yeah, I mean, just making a habit of anything is hard. But I think that once it becomes part of the fabric of your day, then it becomes a given rather than something that's as challenging as it is when you start out.
Mm-hmm. Great. And here's a question, which is good news. Lots of kids have learned to ride bikes while at home. Do we have community partners who could bring bikes to school as a sort of distance play? And would that be COVID safe?
I can't speak to if it will be COVID safe, but I will say that there are many community partners, and one asset would be the King County Play Equity Coalition. There's many members who are currently offering programs around bicycling or cycling that could already come into schools, already in schools or school districts, but also could potentially bring more programmatic aspects to getting more kids engaged in cycling. But I don't know the health benefits or risk, for that matter, that cycling would bring should we integrate that within some of the schools.
There would definitely be ways to make that COVID safe. I mean, like with everything, we're putting protocols into place, and somebody would have to wipe down the common touch surfaces and figure out how to keep helmets and things, disinfected. But again, there are businesses open where you can rent bikes and rent paddle boards and kayaks right now. So if they figured it out, I'm sure we can figure that out for schools and children as well.
Great. Well, we've got time for about 3 more questions. And here's one, which is, are there websites that offer structured or scheduled movement ideas for families and children?
There are a lot of resources out there. There are a lot of great family-oriented blogs that provide a lot of resources. There's some great books that are available through Seattle Public Library or other library systems, audiobooks. There are Facebook groups, including the one that I help run, Outdoor Childhood Puget Sound, which provides ideas. A lot of local publications, Seattle Times, Parent Map, Seattle Child provide a ton of outdoor ideas. So it's all out there. And I think just getting parents access to it and having time to kind of read it and absorb it is the challenge. But we're lucky to have a lot of great inspiration in this area that we live in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a couple of organizations I'd point out specifically. The King County Play Equity Coalition has been compiling list of kind of resources, both organizations and other resources that that groups can use. And then also Shape America, which is the Society of Health and Physical Educators. Their website has a lot of resources kind of for PE teachers and for others who are interested. And they actually have issued, I think a couple of weeks ago, some very specific guidelines and the most comprehensive that I've seen around kind of physical activity and PE and school reopening for the fall. And they provide it based on like, if you're in a hybrid model, if you're in an all in-person model or in an all distance learning model, here are some considerations and guidance. So I think that's a really useful resource for this conversation.
Yeah, and I would love to encourage schools, right? I mean, they have the answers, right? You have physical education teachers, instructors who kind of know what it means to have social isolation when it comes to recreation. So what type of activities could we do, right, when we're at home? And really using the school district's platform to help elevate that, which in turn will hopefully get them to think and reconsider how they can then offer and institute this within the school year that will apply many of the social distancing measures.
Right. Yeah, one parent said, Just Dance is a great video game that doesn't involve going outdoors, but it does get the kids moving. And I'll attest to that. If I can get my son to do that, he really enjoys that. So here's really the last question, which is that the Department of Health in Washington State just held a press conference saying that they're encouraging schools at this point not to reopen in the fall. And so if it turns out that instead of having a hybrid models, as it appears that we were going to have in the fall, and it is going to be remote, what could PE or what should PE look like if it's remote? And what are some ways to work with districts to try to expand on making it more accessible and more inclusive and more fun for kids?
Well, one idea that I have, Arik, actually touches on what you were just talking about bringing dance into households. I wasn't much of an athlete as a kid, but I did a lot of ballet. And I think that when we're looking at ethnic studies, bringing ethnic studies into Seattle Public Schools, but also districts around the state, when we're looking at the lack of art education, when you do online learning, often the districts are paring back to some, the kind of power standards and things that they find most important academically. Art is likely to take a hit. And then the need for in-home physical fitness. I think that really highlighting dance from all different cultures could get kids moving, could get kids thinking, could be like a geography lesson, could bring a lot of different lessons into one, and has the potential to be something that parents and kids can do together and have a really fun experience. I mean, I think that for a lot of families, the kind of impromptu dance party, that happens at 6:30 when just the right song comes on might be the most fun they have together all day long. and it's, you know, forced cardio for us grown-ups who tend not to move as much as we used to. So I think that dance would be a really cool way to bring that activity into the house while kind of tricking kids and parents into getting exercise without really realizing it if they are loath to do so. And just lots of different, you know, kind of creative approaches like that beyond just the kind of calisthenics that we think of when we think of, you know, doing exercise in your living room.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In addition, it could be easy to defer, right, to community-based organizations to come and solve the problem of physical activity. But I think it also is going to require a restructure of the academic day and ensuring that there's a mandate or a requirement for 60 minutes of play or some form of movement, right? Whether that be intertwining that within the academic or various subject matters to include some of the ethnic studies that Anne's spoken to. I mean, there's all types of opportunity. There's all types of creative aspects. We just have to be the creator of it. And allow ourselves and feel confident and be unapologetic that this is the direction we want to move towards so that we can ensure healthy access to all families.
I think there are probably many different possible solutions and kind of listening to the voices of the families in that community and using those voices as sort of inspiration for, you know, does it mean community-based organizations in the schoolyard, even though school is not there in person, can families or children still access that space with other resources, and if that was safely possible? You know, some people may prefer the online options. Others may need kind of a play kit with kind of tools and equipment that could help them move. So I think there's going to need to be a combination and a bit of a tailoring and listening to the voices of those families.
I think it'll be important to not only think in terms of elementary school age kids, but to recognize that middle school and high school kids need physical activity as well. And they're also suffering some of the worst mental health effects right now with isolation and depression. So really figuring out how do we structure a middle school and high school day and not expect kids to sit for 6 straight hours in front of a laptop. It's not developmentally appropriate even for a 16-year-old. Making sure that there's time for outdoor play or movement or something. And I think we're going to have to, as a community, just be creative and bold and create some new partnerships.
Great. Well, thank you, Linnea, Pooja, Anne, and Bookie. This was fantastic. And thanks to all of you for participating and submitting questions. We actually have quite a few questions that were not answered. And I'm wondering, Linnea, Pooja, Anne, and Bookie, would you mind if I shared your contact information with participants so that they can follow up with you afterwards? Okay, great. I'll do that in a follow-up email, which will land in your inbox in about 24 hours. Also, League of Education Voters has gathered resources available in communities across Washington state to help us get through this difficult time of COVID-19. Everything from meal services, distance learning resources, school guidance from the State Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction, and college and scholarship supports to mental health supports, internet and technology resources, childcare and employment resources. You'll find our COVID-19 resources page on our website, educationvoters.org. Our next LEVinar is Wednesday, July 29th, 2 weeks from today. TED speaker and Brownicity.com creator Dr. Lucretia Berry, who's the author of What Lies Between Us, Fostering First Steps Toward Racial Healing, will talk about how parents and teachers can talk to their children and students about race and race-related trauma. She'll also answer your questions. You can register by visiting our website, educationvoters.org, clicking on events, then lunchtime LEVinars, and I'll also send registration information in a follow-up email. On August 5th, Washington State Teachers of the Year, Amy Campbell from 2020, Robert Hand, 2019, Mandy Manning, 2018, and also the 2018 National Teacher of the Year, Camille Jones from 2017, and Nate Bowling from 2016 will share what they're hearing from students, parents, and colleagues in their community. And we'll also talk about what students need for the start of the 2020-2021 school year. And we'll also answer your questions. So I'm really excited about that one too. Thank you to each of you for joining us today. If you have additional questions or comments, please send them to me, Arik @educationvoters.org. That's Arik @educationvoters.org. A recording of today's presentation will be available on our website, educationvoters.org, and will be available on the follow-up email, which I'll be sending to you in about 24 hours. It will have captioning, by the way, so you're welcome to share that as well. If you'd like to learn more about League of Education Voters or support our work, please visit our website. And thank you, each of you, for attending. Each one of us has the right to feel safe and valued. Together, we'll fight for a world in which true educational and economic equity exists. We look forward to seeing you at future LEVinars. Linnea, Pooja, Anne, and Bookie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks.
Thank you for having us.